What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Triple Play Fantasy Network. I am your host, as always, Kevin Coleman at DuBois22, and I have a special guest here, Bryce Williams, a contributor for FFFaceoff.com, and we are here today to bring you a little Devy action, a little mock draft. Who doesn't like mock drafts out here? We're going to go to a first-round Devy mock. Today, the college football playoffs were announced. College football season's kind of officially over, just a bowl game, so why don't we just start? It's already December, man. Let's get into it and talk about this. How are you doing, Bryce?
No, I'm doing awesome. Like I said, I mean, with everything being so quiet now in college football, I guess we have to find a filler, between everyone going everywhere right now. I mean, between the transfer portal and the coaching changes. I mean, on top of even Venables that just happened, talking about with OU, nothing official, but it's one of those, it sounds like that's going to be the thing where it's like, all right.
That's the thing. And then Cristobal's leaving. He's going to Miami. That just came out today.
Yep.
And so, Oregon's going to be open. Everything's shifting everywhere. The transfer portal has completely changed college football. It's free agency now. And we were making a joke this morning in our group chat. I said, with Mechie being injured, he has a torn ACL. I said, man, they're going to look, wide receivers at Alabama, they got to get that depth up there. And one of my buddies, Jeff Bell, was like, why don't they just go get someone on the transfer portal? And I thought it was pretty funny just because that's just the way it looks right now. It's incredible. But we did want to bring to you guys, and what we're going to look at is just the first round. So what we're doing is a Way-Too-Early Devy Mock 2022. And we're going to be looking at just the first round, 12-team Superflex, non-tight end premium, but just 12-team Superflex of guys that we could see. And I think the thing about Devy is that there's really no consensus. And if there is a consensus, it's probably wrong. From what I have found, like when I've done drafts and I've talked about it, I mean, Chuba Hubbard was going to the first round 2 years ago, like the 4th, 5th pick of the draft. And, he's pretty much a backup now. And you're looking at these guys and how they get drafted. I think that when we look at them, you have to be very careful with how you draft. Now, me personally, I've shifted away from drafting quarterbacks in Devy, and especially in the first rounds. So you're not going to see a ton of quarterbacks. You're going to see some quarterbacks in this Devy draft because we have to draft somebody. But I will say, because of the hit rate, because of the DJ Uiagalelei, like those type of guys, I think that you have to be very careful with quarterbacks. And then I try to draft running back heavy. So to be honest with you, I go after the guys of, those type of guys, those assets, that value that's going to stay there. It's one of the reasons why I drafted TreyVeyon Henderson really early in Devy drafts last year. I drafted him at the end of the first in almost every draft if he was available and startups. So that's kind of my strategy. What about you?
Honestly, for me, it's about a similar kind of style because quarterbacks are so volatile in terms of their year-to-year range. I mean, don't forget, no one was talking about Joe Burrow in a lot of leagues, especially before he ended up having that amazing season at LSU. Considering those things, it's one of those I would rather go for a quarterback I have a better shot with later on and risk out on losing the high upside asset because the fact that we can have the DJUs, we can have the players that are there and then suddenly not. Because then a 1 year can change the narrative on a quarterback instantly. And in terms of receivers, they're a better long-term asset in terms of how long their careers can be generally overall, even if you may end up having a time to develop if you have them transition, from college to pro. But then for running back, it's one of those you got to find something special. You can look for the advanced analytics, you can look at the stats, but honestly, if something doesn't jump off the tape, then I personally can't ever convince myself to, even including some of the running backs that are coming out in this year's class, where some have jumped more off the tape to me than others. And when it comes to those, if I don't see something on tape, then it's hard for me to be able to see how if you can translate that to the pro level of. If you couldn't show it then, why are we going to raise the difficulty level and then still expect something better?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And I do think, with what you saw last year, you saw Rattler and DJU going 1-2 in a lot of drafts. And right there, they're sunken assets now. I mean, Rattler's almost completely sunken asset. There's still hope for DJU. And I agree with you. If you're going to draft a running back, you need to make sure that running back is going to have either late first or second round draft capital. And you need to make sure it's a top 50 draft capital. You have to get it in there. So there is not a lot of room for error in those areas. So don't reach on running backs. That's the worst thing you can do. So let's dive into it. So we're going to go through our list. I gave Bryce the 101 because I was feeling nice, and I was hoping that he would take this guy. So who did you have at the 101?
All right, so for number one for me, I ended up going with Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Like I said, he has great usage in the passing game and pass pro, which honestly is one thing that you look for in the early transitions to the pros. His usage also, currently he is on pace to have a much lower usage rate than a lot of other running backs tend to when they come out. Right now, I currently have him projected, if he ends up coming out after his junior year, at about 642 carries, which is going to be less than a lot of the others you'll see, like Breece Hall. Breece Hall is going to be putting 800 carries together, all right, or 800 total touches, all right. In terms for running back, because how you want to make sure that they have like as few of carries as possible, but still have that shown explosiveness, is really one of the big reasons why I went Bijan versus the alternative on that. I mean, a 5.8 yards per carry, and plus with Texas, the fact is that between his limited usage during the 2020 COVID season and then the fact that he's exiting early with an elbow injury now, I don't necessarily know if Texas will be all the way back enough that you'll be seeing him having to put his body on the line for the championship game, for the Big 12 championship, as well as anything involving the playoffs. So I could very much see him still just kind of getting a standard usage. For him, college is really just the check mark to go to the pros versus having to try and play for big games down the line and getting those extra ones where we could have in case, like, for example, we had yesterday with Mechie for Alabama, where you'll have them end up messing up their potential futures on that. And after all, for a running back, last thing you want to do is come back for your senior year.
Yeah, I mean, and we're looking at Devy, and so for Devy, you don't care about what they score in college. So you're looking for the least, and the least volatile lift. When I talk about Breece, that's what I talk about. That dude has so many touches. That guy has so many touches, and you're looking at him like, man, I hope that's not. I hope it's a fallacy in terms of touches, but we've seen it. It has not been. So I do like Bijan. I think it's really between two guys at the top right now. And Bijan is up there. I like everything about him. And there is a scenario where unless we're going to talk about Quinn Ewers, unless he transfers to Texas, Texas could be very out of it again quickly. And, Robinson might look at the landscape and just say, I don't think I need to go play Kansas the last game of the year because it's not worth me getting hurt. So, I mean, that could be it. So, yeah, I do like that. I think he's great in the receiving game. I think he's a phenomenal prospect. When we're talking about guys, they're very good. So you took Bijan at the 101. I'm going to take my guy TreyVeyon Henderson at the 102. And I think it really just becomes either you like TreyVeyon or you like Bijan. To me, if you want immediate production and you want it closer, okay, Bijan would probably tip that scale because he's going to be in the 23 class. Henderson's the 24 class, but this kid has been special this year. 167 attempts, 1,100 yards. 15 touchdowns rushing. He also can do it in the receiving game, and we've seen it this year. He has 4 touchdowns in the receiving game. He has 19 total touchdowns for a freshman, which I believe broke Ohio State's record this year. He's just a special athlete. And when you watch him run, his ability to kind of manipulate and especially manipulate tackles, break tackles, move, not lose speed with every move he's made. Like, he is a special talent. And to be quite honest, he might be the best running back that they've had there the last 20 years. And that's including a lot of those guys that we've seen and we've come out of there. Zeke, these other guys, Dobbins, these other players that we've seen the last even 10 years. Henderson's that dude. And, his usage wasn't amazing this year. I mean, he only had 167 attempts. That's going to go up next year. So he is going to get a little wear these next 2 years. That's for sure. But in that offense, explosive plays, those type of things, I don't necessarily need to worry about that. But to me personally, there's a clear tier for like guys you're going to take at the 101 and 102. And I think it's Robinson and Henderson.
No, and completely agree. Like I said, when it comes to Henderson, vision and burst are the first two things that on his tape stand out. The man had 3 100-yard games this year, and one of them he had for nearly 300 yards, that 277 that he put up. Like I said, he produces. In terms of his usage even, like I said, his projected usage is still going to be similar to that of Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, and and still and around Christian McCaffrey, right around like that 700 range, which is a little bit more of a standard what you might expect from someone who's a day one bell cow back for an offense, especially one like Ohio State.
I think so too. And with what he's been able to put up, I mean, he's clearly, when you want a top echelon guy, that's him. It's Henderson. So it's there. Now, I do think that, the next guy I think is pretty clear that these 3 guys will probably be taken somewhere in a draft, like in the top 3 picks. Then it gets crazy. So that's going to be the fun of it. But who did you take at the 103?
Sharing namesake, I went with Bryce Young, Alabama quarterback. Not for that reason. I went for the reason because the man is good. Like I said, I mean, all I have to do is point to the Georgia game yesterday for watching what he did to that defense and that secondary. And I almost can stand alone on that. I mean, he's had a 10-to-1 touchdown interception ratio this year. Like I said, he's only 6 feet tall, but as you see now with the field getting expanded farther, the field is wider now. So with a bigger field, these shorter quarterbacks don't have to be 6'2", 6'3". They don't have to be 225. He has the accuracy. He plays mistake-free football, and considering how Alabama replaced a first-round quarterback with a first-round quarterback, and now they have Bryce Young, who is going to be the next first-round quarterback. He's going to end up having a top 5, top 10 draft capital at the worst next year. So he's definitely somebody that, at least if you get that, you know what you're getting into from the start. You're not having to worry about necessarily him having a season where suddenly his draft capital disappears. So really big things.
He did it all year. Unlike Rattler, where he came on strong at the end of the year last year, and everybody said, oh, well, they projected. This is not a projection. Bryce Young's going to win the Heisman. Bryce Young is special. And 4,000 yards, 43 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He also can run. Like he's not a dual threat like Konami guy, but he can extend it. Russell's a good example of this. Like that kind of that guy that can score touchdowns. You saw it against Georgia. The Georgia game was special. I mean, he broke the SEC record for passing yards in a game against supposedly the number 1 defense in the country. I mean, if you're looking at what he was able to do, and to be fair to Bryce too, they've had a ton of injuries at the running back position this year. They lack a lot of depth, to be honest. There's a lot of things going on in that Alabama team. If they didn't have Bryce, they could have lost 5-6 games. Like that's kind of the difference maker. He is that good. So I agree. Like I know I talked about maybe not drafting a quarterback. I think Bryce is the safest guy in here. I think these 3 guys are the first 3 picks in no matter what draft that you're in, unless they reach on this next guy that I picked. But would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, easily, because like I said, all those, you know what you're getting in capital. Robinson looks like about a top 15, top 20 pick probably in next year's draft. Henderson already just looks special in his own right. He could probably potentially be top 10 in 2 years. And then Young, like I said, he's going to be top 10 if he falls off a cliff next year.
Yeah. No, he's going. I have a hard time seeing Bryce not going 101.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why, like I said, like it's one of those, like if he like showed up and was like, "Hi guys, I lost my arm in a tragic accident," you'd be like, "Cool, we're gonna use the 6th overall pick on him." Then, like we trust it. He's good.
Yeah, he's that good. He's special. The way he manipulates his intangibles, his arm strength, he's got everything. I mean, he's built for the NFL. Like he is built. Like you don't need to worry about him. Now, my next pick, and this is where I feel like it could go kind of different ways, but mine's still Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. I love this kid, especially in PPR formats, especially in fantasy purposes. Now, he's transferring from Georgia Tech. We don't know where he's going. He's in the transfer portal right now. To me, that doesn't really make a difference to me because he's going to play next year anyway, and this might actually help out his draft capital. And right now, the projected ball, the 247 projected ball, has him going to Alabama. If that's the case, if he goes to Alabama and he can and with those injuries that they've had in that running back room, I think he could step right in and be the starter, to be completely honest with you. Kind of a la Jameson Williams, especially with the injuries. I know they have guys coming in, but he is that special, and he can catch the ball. And when you're looking at from a fantasy perspective and what he can do, he's explosive. He's been in one of the worst offenses in college football this year, and he still is explosive. He's able to do that kickoff return, those type of things. His receiving ability is 465 yards receiving this year alone with 2 touchdowns. So PPR-wise, he's going to be there. Everybody's going to say this is Kamara. And it's not a bad comp. I hate comps, but he's just special. And I don't think the transfer really matters to me. I just think that he's up there. And if you're going to, I think he can be easily the second running back taken in this class. So that's where he bumps up to me at the 104. What do you think about Gibbs?
Honestly, I absolutely love Gibbs. He's one of the ones that I've traded so many assets to the 2023 draft in one of my dynasty leagues just for the sake of I am trying to be able to see if I can get Robinson and Gibbs. Yeah. Gibbs, the way he catches the ball out of the backfield, and I know you hate comps, but for me, in terms of if you watch the tape side by side with Dalvin Cook when he was at Florida State, they have the same running style. They still the same way they attack the hole, the same way they worry about setting up their blockers. All of it is literally identical on that. Now, sure, well, it could be what he ends up producing to be, but still, with his dual threat capabilities and the way he likes to be able to end up trying to use his speed and his suddenness on that, ends up working out great for him. Plus, he has such a low touch count so far. Currently, right now, like I said, his career touches, like I said, he has, I projected 611 for him. That's ridiculously low on that, especially for running backs. That I mean, you have guys like Derrick Henry and stuff like that. When they came out, they had 620. Like I said, we have the guys like Christian McCaffrey in the 700s. But still, the fact Gibbs, and that's with him getting a 300 total touches next year, he'd still be around the 600 range. So low for a guy who has the explosiveness. He ends up having with that low usage, it's going to give better for the fact of not worrying about near as much wear and tear. Because as we've noticed kind of a little bit more, it's not necessarily the age of the running back, it's the number of carries.
Yeah, and he doesn't have that. He'll be fine. I think even next year if they
Mhm.
get leaned on a little bit, I do think him and Bryce, if he does go to Alabama, that's going to be special.
And see, and the other team I'm hearing is Tennessee as a possibility as
Yeah.
one for that. So now Alabama, cancel Christmas. We don't even have to worry about holding a playoff next year. We can just hand it to Alabama and just save everyone the injury time. But also, there is the possibility of Tennessee, which I realize would be kind of iffy considering the Kamara comps. But like I said, it's just the other name I've heard out there at least. So
Yeah, and that'd be a great offense for him to go into. They'll utilize him in the right way. Like he'll be in there. And to me, I think he's going to be the second running back, unless one of these other guys kind of pops up. I still expect him to be a second running back taken. So,
yeah.
All right, what do you got at 105? Little hot takey, I guess. Maybe,
All right.
maybe it depends.
Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and yes, you can be biased because of the Michigan's shutting down of Ohio State, if you will. But honestly, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is the best wide receiver on his team right now, and he's currently sharing time with two other first-round wide receivers. He's dynamic, even in the return game. I mean, with 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he has the similar talent to them. But however, they're both going to be off, so I see an increased target share for him, and it's only going to end up increasing the value he has. And he got the bump personally for me over, what some of the other ones, like, for example, Kayshon Boutte, because we have guys like C.J. Stroud going to be feeding him the ball. So he has already their winning program that already has a running game, so the offense won't be one-dimensional, thus freeing up over-top coverages for him. He has a quarterback who knows how to throw the ball to him so much that basically everyone else who played quarterback left the university. And so that's where a lot of it, where you watch him at that point of attack on the ball, he really does know a lot of what he's doing at a very early age. I can only see his route running continuing to improve and him really becoming something special.
Yeah, you're talking to a JSN truther for 2 years now. I've been on JSN. Like I put him in my top 10 2 years ago coming out, and
Yeah.
I love this kid. And people don't understand that he played at the Texas 5A level, which is the highest level you can play. And I think he still holds a receiving yards record for Texas. I don't know if anybody knows out there, but Texas plays a lot of good football, and he was phenomenal there. And he's athletic; he can finish. If you look at what he does, he had 80 receptions, 1,200 yards this year. He led the team in both those categories over Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. JSN is going to be for the first wide receiver taken next year. I have a hard time not seeing that unless Kayshon Boutte comes back and those guys are like battling right back and forth with each other. But JSN is that special, especially in this offense. Like, we're going to be talking about JSN. If JSN can stay healthy with Stroud and these guys next year, we could potentially be talking about JSN and Stroud up for the Heisman. They could both get the invite.
And easily for their future NFL draft capital, you could see Jackson easily having a Waddle or a Chase type of top 10 grade, top 5 grade.
Yeah,
to be able to carry by that point.
It would not shock me to see him go in the top 10. It just would not shock me. That's easy. I mean, it wouldn't shock me to go to the top 5 if if a team really needs him. He is that special. And as a Michigan guy, I love a lot of Ohio State players because they get all the good players. That's just is what it is.
It's okay. You guys turned the M into a W like a week ago, so you can say all the love you want for all the Ohio State players now. It makes it perfectly okay.
It makes it feel a little better that I could actually be like, I love them, but we beat them. All right, let's go to the 106. My guy's Kayshon Boutte. And you know what? I like Kayshon. The thing about Kayshon is he would have been probably the 101 for the wide receiver in this class if he didn't get hurt. And we don't I've been looking up trying to find what that damn injury has been. And they have kept this thing quiet. And everybody kind of assumes they know what it is, and an ACL or something going on there. But he's been out for the year. But before he got out, he was on a tear. So when you're looking at what he did in 6 games, 38 receptions, 509 yards, and 9 touchdowns, he's a touchdown scoring machine. He scored 9 touchdowns in 6 games. He is solid. Again, there's a lot of question marks about him right now. So, like, in my opinion, like with that injury, he should be able to bounce back. I'm not really worried about that. Does he stay at LSU? That's the other question mark. With all the turnover, can Kelly get him to stay there? I think he does because he's from Louisiana. I don't see him leaving the state because that's his home school. But there are question marks with Boutte. But that's the number one thing Kelly's got to do. Keep him there. I still think he's clearly the 102 in that class. In terms of wide receivers, he's the second-ranked wide receiver or first, depending on JSN and him. And it's going to be a fun battle for the rest of the year.
No, it really is. And I mean, like, for me, like I said, it's so much about what's going to be happening with Boutte at LSU. Like I said, between also the way that the fan base reacts very player-centric at LSU, I don't know how well that he would end up reacting to being on the wrong side of Brian Kelly correcting him. So, like, honestly, between that and between the fact that we do have the recent parallel of Ja'Marr Chase being, when he saw the program and wasn't exactly looking in the right direction, you really have to question if he doesn't go to the transfer portal. The narrative on him is probably going to be very similar for the course of a season of you have to hope and bank that his name carries through if he by chance doesn't end up continuing with this team, considering how LSU currently has no direction and heck no staff. That's one guy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we all know Kelly's an asshole. Like, we know that. That's just who he is. And will they be able to kind of reevaluate that? And the quarterback situation is not amazing. Mac Johnson's there. I know they're bringing in guys, recruiting class, but you never know about your freshmen. Who knows what's going to happen to that stuff? So there are some question marks about that LSU roster. But I still think he deserves to go to the top 6 of this draft. Now, I do disagree with your next pick. So we're going to talk about this one a little bit. So who do you have at the 107?
All right. Josh Downs, North Carolina. He's got a 42-inch vertical. He's already showing a lot of good concepts when it comes to running routes and setting up defenders on those. I have clips of him where he knows the right time to make sure you're hitting the shoulder of the defensive back so you can get them to turn before making a move. That's something that I think you'll only see stand out more and more because while we see lots of talent come through, in terms of learning those concepts of where to set up defenders, that's usually the thing that will send any receiver to the next level much better. Now, yes, with Sam Howell leaving, it does leave some question marks about who's going to exactly throw him the ball. He has benefited from that. But you watch the way he ends up working on the field in space one-on-one before the ball even shows up, and it's something I feel like you're going to see a Keenan Allen-like mastery of that. And that alone can get you so much progress at the next level.
Okay. And now I like the pick because I don't say I disagree with it. I just had some fun with it because I think there are some other guys I might take ahead of him in terms of this. Like, I think that, I think Xavier Worthy, I would have thought about taking Xavier Worthy at this point. We're going to talk about him in a little bit.
Of course.
The concern for me is what you said with Hal. Because what we saw was we've seen Diami Brown now, Daz Newsome kind of disappeared. These guys have not really produced in the NFL. So are these guys a product of that easy kind of system in North Carolina and how? Or is Downs really now? I like Downs. Downs is pretty good. For what we've seen, he's production. He's produced this year. I just worry that the offense and the quarterback made the player, if that makes sense.
No, completely. I understand that. And especially the downside as someone who played receiver before is that if you run a great route and they don't throw you the ball, you don't get any points or really near as much shine on that. But like I said, there's plenty of times off ball you will still see with Downs that he does manage to end up still doing great setups. So it's one of those ones where he should still probably get a fairly decent draft capital used on him in the NFL draft. Like I said, the big question is what they will end up doing to fix the quarterback situation for them in the meantime to try to continue to allow him to shine.
So you would rather have Josh Downs over Jordan Addison?
Yes, only because also with the fact that we have Kenny Pickett, who also is going to be taking off. It's question with the Pitt program for continuing. It's kind of the same kind of level of, next year, what's it going to translate to? And Downs, I think, has a better chance of navigating the storm, if you will, trusting the idea that Mac Brown knows how to try and do some recruiting and that the transfer portal's still been producing talent at a fair level for everyone. So that's what at least I'm still trying to bank off of for that.
I think it's a BMI question too, because Addison's smaller and Downs is bigger, and the weight's going to be a little bit of a stickly point for some people out there too. So I do agree. I think it just kind of depends on where you want to go with the wide receivers. I don't hate drafting wide receiver that high. I think it just kind of depends. For me personally, where I would have went and was where I did go is Tank Bigsby from Auburn. I still like Tank. I know that Tank has kind of fallen down a little bit based on kind of what he had this season. He didn't have a bad year. He had 207 attempts, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. He also had 116 yards receiving, so nothing really to sneeze at there. He wasn't amazing in the receiving game, but they didn't really have. I mean, they got Bo Nix. They had questionable quarterback play. I like the rushing ability of Bigsby. I do think that he can be a 3-down back in the NFL. He's got the size I'd like to see. If he can get up to that 215, 220 mark, I love him even more. I believe he's at 210 listed. I don't know exactly where that's going to be, especially with listed. I don't trust it. But I do think he's a solid back. And with what you see, what he's been able to do, even against Alabama, he looked okay. Obviously, he went out of bounds in that bad play. But I think that he is a very solid back. And I think that when you're looking at this, these are one of those top guys in that 23 class that you like. So I have him as my third running back right now. It's close between him and Zach Evans from not TCU now since he's in the transfer portal. But Tank's up there.
Oh no, and honestly, that's a great choice on it. The only thing that got me was the longevity of the receivers versus running backs. Only reason, otherwise, I probably would have gone a similar route. But at the same time, Bigsby, the fact is that he accounted for 22% of the offense right now for Auburn. Already a fifth, 1/5 of every yard that gets moved there is because of him. Between the tackles, he's probably one of the best runners. I even like his work better than Gibbs, even just strictly between the tackles. He really knows how to end up lowering his shoulder, doesn't shy away from contact on that.
No, he's solid. He's a solid back.
Yeah, and like I said, so the question is in that case, it's how much will he still end up doing on an Auburn team? In that point, that you never know which Auburn you're going to be getting. Sometimes you'll see where Bigsby will have these, or you'll see he'll have these games where he has 20 plus carries, but then he has 60 something yards, and then you'll have the other games where so he ends up doing better off. So my question more so is the Auburn offensive line, if they'll continue to find consistency in order to allow Bigsby to have the best chance. Since right now Bigsby looks more like in the NFL draft next year, he'd be carrying a second round grade.
Yeah, I think he's a second round grade for sure. And there is something to say about Jarquez Hunter, the true freshman that kind of took some carries from him this year and kind of bounced in there. So he gave way a little bit to there. Didn't become a full running back by committee, but Hunter was in there taking some snaps from him. So I think that's something to keep your eye on next year. But I think it will ultimately help him, and especially with that area. And if they get some wide receivers in there, they get that offense a little bit better. I can see Harsin doing things for him. All right, what do you get at the 109?
All right, Michael Mayer. All right, and yes, I know this isn't tight end premium, but at the same time, the way that he ends up standing out between his inline work and working out of the slot, I think it's something that, again, last thing you want to do is be the person trying to figure out what to do at tight end, because the answer is usually nothing. Like I said, nearly 25% of all the passing yards, attempts, and touchdowns all run directly through him. He is a funnel on that offense. Regardless of everyone else that is out there, it does seem to end up going to him. He's big, he's physical, he's a matchup nightmare, like I said. And the way that he still works, his versatility, you could be seeing similar to a Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson style draft stock used on him very early on. And even though tight ends sometimes can take an extra year to develop, usually having like a sophomore year breakout, he has all the potential in those points, as well as he's at least shown on tape the things he can do. I mean, one of the things I always like famously showing is how he ends up shaking Jordan Battle. Literally in the playoffs last year for that touchdown that he ended up getting, where he puts him on skates, and that's not something you're supposed to be doing at that size.
Yeah, Mayer is great. I think when it comes down to Mayer, do you want to reach from this high? And I think that's the question you're going to have out there for yourselves. Like, if you think he can be, when I was looking at player comps, I heard Shockey / no one wants to ever say Gronk, because Gronk is like the Bear standard. I heard Shockey / kind of that comp. If they use him more, if they use him better, they haven't really unleashed him. He should be getting tons of targets a game. He doesn't necessarily get. He's efficient with his targets, but he doesn't get all those targets. I could see him going in there. He's probably a first round tight end. Like, he's going to be in that range. So he's going to get the draft capital that you like to see. I think it's really between him and Bowers right now, Brock Bowers from Georgia. The difference between the two, and this is why I like Bowers. I have Bowers slightly ranked ahead, but it's only because, especially for C2C, just because of the targets. It's the targets they get. They kind of run their offense through Bowers, where Mayer doesn't get that offense through. So I don't want to ding Mayer for that, because that's not necessarily his fault. I think Notre Dame just kind of runs their offense that way. We're going to see Notre Dame with a better quarterback next year, hopefully. Buncher is going to be there kind of throwing him the ball. I do think that he's going to have that high acceleration. I don't mind him being a first round. In a real draft that I did with a bunch of different guys recently, I took him at the 112. And that was tied in premium, but I still took him at the 112. So I think that when you're looking at perspective-wise, I think he's a first-round talent.
And like I said, minus him and Bauer, you quickly find yourself grasping for straws at the tight end position fast in terms of what guys really stand out as that type. And yeah, he does still get 20% target share, but it would be nicer to see him closer around about that 28 range. Would be a more about acceptable considering the talent he has versus a lot of his fellow Irish.
And there's no tight end that you want besides those two guys. So just know, that it's pretty fair out there.
That's the reason why. Like I said, so why did I pick him? Why? Because if I didn't pick him, then someone else does, and then right after, that's probably the cue to take Bauer. So you're not the last person without.
I mean,
anyone.
To be honest, like Mayer will probably be a top 6 dynasty asset by the time he gets drafted. Like just
Yep.
based on the tight end landscape. I mean, if Pat Fryermuth is doing this, shit, Michael Mayer is better than Pat Fryermuth. So when you're looking
Yep.
at kind of that concept, all right, I said I wasn't going to take a quarterback, but I took a quarterback, and it's Caleb Williams. And this is based on upside. I know Venables is going there now in Oklahoma. If he stays in Oklahoma, I do think that we're going to see this evolution of him as a quarterback. I do think the Lincoln Riley thing, him leaving, does hurt him a little bit, but I love his talent and what he was able to do. And I just go back to that Texas Tech game that I saw him play. And I broke down that film the other day and I was looking at it. 23 for 30, 402 yards and 6 touchdowns. And he was an absolute menace out there. And he can pretty much do it all. I think the big question mark for Williams was, can he be a thrower? Yes, he can. And I do think that he's pretty talented in that mindset. I know that there's a ton of quarterbacks in that class that have question marks right now. You know, Ewers, these other areas of like who are we going to draft, where they come from. I think Caleb's is a risky play here, but I'm willing to bet on the talent that I've seen on the field. And at the 110, I don't think that's as big of a reach as people will say it is. So this is a risky pick. Everybody that knows me knows I like to take risky picks, and this is one of mine. So what did you think about Williams at the 110?
Honestly, like I said, he's a Konami QB. The way that he ends up moving around, he uses his legs efficiently, and that does translate, as we've seen more evolving in the NFL. We've seen the Jalen Hurts, we've seen the Kyler Murrays, where if you are running, you can be so much more effective at it. As to before, it was viewed as a crutch where you had to be able to throw the ball. But now with the way the field has gotten wider, it does make more sense for them to be able to move around. Like I said, Caleb, the way he ends up doing out there on the field, like I said, I mean, the Texas Tech game you brought up is a great example of the way that he ends up. He can still end up making the reads. He's still working, like I said, first, second read, he's working towards 3 or 4, sometimes can be more. However, I think he really ends up doing well in this Oklahoma offense so far. We'll see. Like I said, I remember, actually I chuckled because remember you ended up saying that Lincoln Riley should go to USC, and sure enough, they ended up doing it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that carryover will go for him, especially if we are bringing over some Clemson. I don't know if we want to take that Clemson offense with us over to there. I think that might be the big thing that with Caleb, it's one of those, you'll look like a genius, all right, a year from now, or we won't be talking about it and we'll just pretend it didn't happen, because I feel like it could go either way with it for him.
I will say that, Venables' top choice is Ole Miss's offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby.
Exactly.
If he can get Lebby, I'm very comfortable with Williams. Like, if he can get Lebby, okay, I'm okay with Williams. If he doesn't get Lebby, then I'm a little more concerned. But if he can get Lebby, I'm okay with that.
No, completely agree. Like I said, especially that Ole Miss offense has been operating. As long as Lebby can come over and keep the foot on the gas too, then I think that Williams will do just fine.
Yep. All right. What do you got at 111?
Sean Tucker, Syracuse
your guy. This is Bryce's guy right here.
Yep. All right. Look, he does have heavy usage. However, he does show the ability to jump quickly into the next gear. The acceleration he ends up having does remind me of players like we saw, like for Travis Etienne, where you can, as soon as the hole opens, he is through the hole. He is on to the next gear. All right. He does have nearly 1,500 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns, and he hasn't had to shy away from defenders, knowing that he's kind of the only person who's going to touch the ball in that Syracuse offense.
Yeah.
Vision that he has combined with his acceleration has helped him behind what's been a very subpar offensive line.
Yeah, I like Sean. It's weird seeing his name up here, because I probably would have went Zachary Evans, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love Evans. But Evans hasn't produced like Tucker, so that's a very real thing. Like, let's be real. Evans has not produced like Tucker. There's been a lot of question marks about Evans' maturity, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I know that I'm not a big analytic guy, because I'm just not. I try to do everything I possibly can to be a good analytic guy. But what I will say is Tucker is through the roof. Anything that you look, weighted dominator rating, backfield rating, like Tucker is completely crushing these guys. So when you look at that from that mindset, and if I'm looking it up right now, when you look at Tucker and what he's been able to do this year, I mean, his dominator rating is 0.34. You want to have it at about 0.25-ish in that range. So he is way up there in terms of what he's doing. He's beating Bijan, I believe. He's ahead of these guys. So we've been talking about these guys in there. I do think from an analytical profile, Tucker deserves to be in this list. It's just, will he be able to get into that draft capital in this loaded class? It just really depends. Like, next year's going to be big for him. He's been doing it, though, in a Syracuse offense that isn't that great, especially with what they've had in that conference. So I love that you picked him here. Little high for me, but if it's your guy, you got to go for it. And like I said, Devy is just Devy. Like, you know what? Tucker could shoot up the running back 2 next year, and nobody would be denied.
Mm-hmm. And that's honestly, like I said, that's the reason why I had to go with him on that. Just the way his film also stands out. And as I said, like, you have to be able to look at a guy and go, do I love this? Yes, Evans could have been an option, and I do like a lot of his film. However, with those maturity questions and with the turnover involving TCU, you know what? Syracuse might not be great, but at the same time, he is still at least consistent with the program. He still is going to have around 700 700 touches for usage. That's about, standard on there. That's similar to like a McCaffrey or a Najee if we're talking about running backs from, the past, like 5-10 years. And that's about normal for that. So like I said, for me at Sean Tucker, I will gladly take it. Any upside or downside that comes with him on that. Like I said, I have a strong feeling, at least when it comes for how he should end up doing at the next level. Probably still end up with a 3rd or 4th round draft grade, but I think, though, with running back, though, that hasn't shied away a lot of teams necessarily from using them. If you've seen a lot of the backs in the league when you see their capital versus their usage.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know what, I like the pick. Evans, especially in the transfer portal, where is he going to go? And in terms of Devy, I mean, it's not a terrible pick in terms of what we're looking at. Now, my next guy, there was a lot of guys on the board right here, guys, so please don't yell at me based on who is there. But you know what? I couldn't let this guy slip out of the first round because I don't think he would have slipped out of the first round. That's Xavier Worthy. He had one of the best true freshman wide receiver years in the country. I'm a little sad because he was enrolled at Michigan and he didn't go to Michigan, and that hurts. But now we're in the playoffs, so you can kiss my ass. But I will say he's a Fresno kid, and he's from Fresno out here. I actually watched him play high school ball out here recently. 2 years ago, I saw him. He's one of the most explosive kids I've ever seen. Now, he's small. I mean, you can see it from his picture. 6'1", 160 is what he's listed at. But he's just efficient. 62 reception, 981 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Usage has been up there. Dominator has been up there. Like, he is a solid prospect. Against OU in that huge game that they had, they should have won. 9 receptions, 261 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 14 receptions against Kansas. We've seen him dominate. I think that he is – I don't want to say he's the clear number 1 in that wide receiver room for the 2024 class, but he's up there. He's probably wide receiver 1 right now based on just profile production. I still like IJ Hall if he can figure his life out. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State could jump up once he gets some run. I like JoJo Earl, but he just tore his ACL. I love Troy Franklin, but he did not do great at Oregon this year. And now with the coaching influx, so you're looking at Worthy being the 101 right now in that class in terms of production. So I didn't want him to sneak out of the first round, so I had to get him.
No, of course, and that's you going for your guy right there on that. Like I said, and Worthy. I mean, a big thing that we'll end up finding out is what will happen with Quinn Ewers on that, because after all, the Texas right now is like one of the top teams that potentially ending up with him, and that can completely upgrade the narrative for Worthy to a whole different level on that. It's one of those ones where, as you mentioned, with the fact that the 2024 receiver class right now having a little bit of a minefield of how everyone might end up between whether they're going to get together, between injuries, where he's so far avoided all that, and he has a chance to not only avoid the disastrous first year that many others have had, but he has the potential to end up getting a serious upgrade at quarterback, and suddenly now he might be a head and shoulders above everyone else, to where if you want a receiver from 2024, your options are kind of Worthy, or you're finding yourself a lot quicker having to look at the landscape similar to the drop-off like with tight end, where you're going, I have a lot more question marks if I am investing at this position and for this general time frame.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right, and I think that when you're looking at it from that, if he gets Ewers, you got to have that Worthy rocket ship, because it's just going to be up there. And so that's our top 12. So Bijan, Henderson, Bryce Young, Jahmyr Gibbs, JSN, Kayshon Boutte, Josh Downs, Tank Bigsby, Michael Mayer, Caleb Williams, Sean Tucker, and Xavier Worthy. And I just wanted to kind of go through. We might do a second round, but it's just some snubs that I think could possibly up there. Zach Evans, I think that he should kind of, Quinn Ewers, wherever he is going, I think these guys should maybe be up there. I know CJ Stroud is on the outside looking in, but I think there's some real question marks. I love CJ, but when we're looking from a Devy perspective, I think that it really depends on what you expect. Can he be that next level guy? I think there's some question marks there. I know the Ohio State fans will come after me, but I do think there's some question marks about his accuracy. Can he translate that Ohio State offense into an NFL kind of production? We've seen Fields struggle a little bit this year. Will Stroud struggle as well? Braylon Allen up there. I think Braylon Allen has come on way too fast. Do not overdraft Braylon Allen. That's the one thing I will say there. I'm not going to overdraft him. Do you think of anybody or those guys that I mentioned that maybe deserve to get in the first round, or are you comfortable with where we're at?
Well, for the most part, I'm comfortable where we're at. I will admit that, with Stroud kind of being, one that missed the list, I'm sure will be one that will catch a lot of people between like what he had been, recruited as, and between some of, the capital involving him. But you do have to end up having a question, at least for the going to the NFL, the Ohio State quarterback does have a little bit of not necessarily the smooth transitions. Now, yes, obviously we can't be like impartial to programs because remember, Kyler Bowler was the quarterback from Cal before Aaron Rodgers was, so some people made giant mistakes just based upon just looking at something blind, just looking at the logo for the school. I think one that I might have considered too was possibly Will Shipley off Clemson. He did end up doing well during his time frame. He did get only a light usage, but again, considering what Clemson might be doing with their offense, that's kind of one of the big things on that, and whether or not DJU can get back on track. Those, I think, were some things that kind of kept me from someone like a Will Shipley to possibly even end up tossing in at the end, since after all, running back is a spot where if you can hit on that, you can basically set yourself up for, quite a run.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like Shipley. I'm glad you brought him up. I did draft Shipley at the 112 in a C2C league just because of production. But in a Devy, I'm not there yet with him based on production and what he did. But you could see it. I think he's more of a second round asset there. So those are our first round Devy mock. That's what we came up with, and that's what he said. So in the comments, please tell us why we were wrong. You love to do that. Also, please follow Bryce on Twitter at Bryce NFL. Bryce, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, man.
No, thanks as always, Kevin. It's always a pleasure.
All right, be sure to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, that like button. We really appreciate you guys. We're trying to push to 1,500 by the end of December. Until next time, we'll see you.